How's it going, everybody? So, one of the more expensive decks to play in Magic the Gathering, specifically in the Commander format, is Dragons, because some of the most popular dragons, like the BRRRR Dragon and the Ancient Copper Dragon and stuff like that, tend to be very, very expensive cards monetarily, due mainly because dragons are very, very popular, and they have a tendency to be printed at Rare and Mythic in a lot of sets, because they tend to be big, showcasey cards that Wizards wants to push because they know dragons are popular. It's kind of like the Charizard tax in the Pokemon TCG. Doesn't matter how good a Charizard card is, it's going to be more expensive than other cards. So I figured that dragons would actually be the perfect kind of deck to try to have another $15 deck challenge for. So what we need to do is we need to have a deck that has a commander that is $1 or less, and then the 99 of the deck needs to be $15 or less in total, and we should be able to make a deck that is fully functional at any table that we are at, regardless of power level, CDH notwithstanding. And we should not have, oh, my deck is low budget as an excuse for the deck not performing well. We should be able to make a deck that is just as strong as what anybody else brings to the table with those parameters. So, with that in mind, let's go ahead and talk about the deck's commander we are using today, Genex the Astral Hunter. Now, Genex is a very straightforward dragon. Anytime it or another dragon enters the battlefield, you create a treasure token, and it's a choose a background commander, so arguably one of the more important pieces is this background here, the Feywild Visitor, which is the other half of the Genex commander set we are running. Whenever a commander we have is out on the board, anytime we hit somebody with a creature at all, we create a 1/1 blue fairy creature token, basically once per turn, because it is a when one or more creatures you control deal damage. So, because Genex does not say non-token dragons, every time we punch somebody in the nose with a dragon, we're going to spawn not only a little 1/1 fairy, but we're also going to spawn a treasure token, because that is a fairy dragon token. So, our strategy is going to be to get as many big dragons on the board as possible and make them as mana efficient as possible, so that even if our board gets cleaned up, because it's going to be cleaned up multiple times because people don't want dragons to sit on the board for too long, we want to have plenty of treasures to not only cast more dragons, but also benefit specifically from the treasure count on our board. So, in order to do that, let's go ahead and first talk about the ramp section of this deck, which is a bit daunting. It's a 16-card ramp section, which seems like a lot, but trust me, it's not as much as you'd think when you start seeing the types of ramp that we have chosen for the deck. So first we have Commander Sphere. It can tap for any color and can sack it to draw a card. We also have the Fire Diamond, which is a, it just taps for red and costs 2 mana. In the same vein, we also have Sky Diamond, which taps for blue mana on curve for us. Fractured Power Stone, which taps for a colorless mana, but it's also on very, very easy curve for us to follow because it is a 2 mana rock that taps for 1. Mind Stone taps for 1, but it is also a draw card in a pinch when we need it to be. And then we have Izzet Signet as a final 2 mana rock for the deck. We can tap it to get 2 mana of the color that our deck is. Very, very easy. It's one of the few decks I've been able to actually afford slotting a Signet in. It feels really weird. Then in our 3 mana rocks, we have Honored Heirloom, which allows us to have a little bit of graveyard control. Letter of Acceptance, which is basically Mind Stone, but for 3 mana as well. Worn Power Stone, which can tap for 2 mana of colorless color, which is still important to us because we have a 5 mana commander and we're not in green, so we need to get that out as fast as possible. Then we have the Unstable Obelisk, which allows us to sack it to blow up any permanent later in the game. Kind of important because a lot of the ways we're going to blow up cards is going to be with damage, because that's a thing that dragons are very good at doing. The problem we run into when we are doing that is we don't have much ways of blowing up artifacts and enchantments and planeswalkers if we don't have damage that can be aimed at them specifically. So Unstable Obelisk lets us get away with just blowing up anything on the board. It's a fairly pretty decent card in budget decks. Then we have the Young Red Dragon, moving on to our creature-based ramp. We can use 2 mana to get a treasure token with it when we play it as its adventure side, and then we can play it as a dragon on its other side. It's not a super great dragon on its own, but it's going to create us 2 treasures because of how our commander works, and that's perfectly reasonable for a 4-mana 3/2. Then we have Swashbuckler Extraordinaire and Patron of the Arts, which both enter the battlefield to create a treasure. Patron of the Arts says when it enters the battlefield or dies, you create a treasure, while the Swashbuckler says whenever you attack, you can sacrifice 1 or more treasures to give that many target attacking creatures double strike until end of turn. So this Swashbuckler can actually help us close out games pretty hard for us. It's a pretty powerful card, not gonna lie. Then we have the Rapacious Dragon. When it enters the battlefield, we create 2 treasures, and the Reckless Barbarian that is a dragon that can sacrifice it for some temporary mana, which is still very, very helpful in a dragon deck. But we should probably talk about some of that removal I mentioned before, because we need to clear the way for our dragons to do their thing. So we have a fairly dense 14-card removal and interaction package. Let's go ahead and go over what we've got. We've got Abrade to blow up creatures and artifacts. We've got Disruption Protocol, Bane's Contingency, Ice Out, Negate, and Sapphire Dragon's Adventure Side, as well as Sinister Sabotage, as a very, very deep 6-card counterspell package. The reason we are so deep on counterspells is, 1, we're in blue, we have access to them. But 2, more importantly, we are playing dragons. So when you're building a deck, you need to make sure that you understand exactly how easy it is for your board to be dismantled. So when you're playing a go wide strategy like dragons or elves, you need to have ways of making sure that when your opponent casts the inevitable board wipe, you don't just die to the board wipe. You don't want to have just a big glaring weakness in your deck that isn't in some way something that you can respond to. You don't want to just be like, yeah, no, I built this fun deck and it folds to basic things in precons. Like, no, you don't want to do that. And then we have Bogarden Hellkite. Whenever it enters the battlefield, deal 5 damage divided as you choose to any number of target creatures or players. So you can drop the Bogarden Hellkite in at flash speed to blow up an attacking creature, or get rid of a creature that's about to be used as part of a combo. So like your opponent plays an Umbral Mantle and they've got a piece that they want to go infinite with. You just drop the Bogarden Hellkite at instant speed, blow up the card, and now you got a dragon on the board to do other things with. Chaos Warp can get rid of any type of permanent and then replace it with another one. That one can backfire sometimes, but it is one of the only types of Omni removal we have access to, so we're going to use it. Then we have Lozan Dragon's Legacy. Anytime you cast an adventure spell or a dragon spell, deal damage equal to that spell's mana value to any target that is not a commander. Note, that also means you can hit players with this. You can burn the last bit of a player's life down with this card. You can also use this card to make sure that any creatures that are on the board that are problematic can be taken care of. Then we have the Flame Blast Dragon. Whenever it attacks, we can pay for basically a Banefire spell. Deal X damage to any one target. That can be a player, that can be a target that we need to blow up off the board. It can be anything, even commanders. It can even hit planeswalkers. It's perfectly reasonable. Then we have the Tyrant of Kerr Ridge. When it enters the battlefield, deal 4 damage to any target, and then it has the Fire Breathing mechanic. Pay 1 mana to give it 1/0 until end of turn. And then Thunder Dragon. When it enters the battlefield, it's a board wipe for every creature that doesn't have flying. Most of our creatures have flying, as they are dragons. So this is going to be one of the easy access board wipe interaction cards that we can use. And we can use it multiple times because we have clones in the deck. I'll talk about that here in a sec. And then we have Meteor Golem. So Meteor Golem is one of my absolute favorite Magic the Gathering cards. 7 mana, which is super easy for us to get in a big mana dragon deck. Blow up any non-land permanent a player controls. I never want to hear the argument from somebody that they're playing in a color combination that has a really hard time dealing with certain types of cards in Commander, because in Commander, you should be able to just make sure that you've got plenty of ways to blast through your opponent's stuff regardless. You've got 99 cards. Put some interaction in in your deck, please. It's very, very simple. But then we need to be able to get to the dragons we're going to be talking about soon. So how are we going to get to our dragons? Well, with a 10-card deep draw package. Let's start with Young Blue Dragon. It is, of course, a dragon on its non-adventure side, but it also lets us pay for a 2-mana opt, scry 1, draw 1. I normally wouldn't call this a draw card, but it does pull double duty for us, so it's fine. Quick Study lets us draw 2 cards at instant speed, Divination lets us draw 2 cards at sorcery speed, and Distant Melody allows us to draw cards equal to the number of dragons that we control. And then, because we are a treasure deck, we have Shimmer Dragon. As long as you have 4 more artifacts, it has hexproof, so it's hard to deal with. You can tap any 2 artifacts you control to draw a card. So if we've spawned like 10 treasures throughout the game and haven't used them for anything, we just tap 10 treasures, draw 5 cards, and we can do that every single turn cycle. We will keep our hand filled with nice dragons. Then we have Factor Fiction. Hand piles of cards to your opponent. They choose door number 1 or door number 2 to hand to you, and you pick a door that you're going to go through. Those are the cards you get to keep. Military Intelligence is a wonderful card in this deck. When you attack with 2 or more creatures, draw a card. Note, the deck will almost always have 2 creatures on the board, because outside of the commander, the enchantment that we have backing the commander up, make sure that we always have a 1/1 blue fairy available, so we will constantly get access to more cards this way. Reconnaissance Mission, we can cycle it when we need to, but most of the time, whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. Again, that counts for your little 1/1 fairy tokens. We're going to draw tons of cards off of this. And then Bide Nathasa, same thing. Whenever you attack with a creature and you hit an opponent, draw a card. We also have the ability to make it to where our opponents attack this turn if able. So what we can do with this, if we know that our opponent is trying to stack up blockers against us, we can use the Biden of Thassa to make sure that their creatures are forced to attack, and then we can just punch in for game. We are a combat deck, so we need to have access to those combat options. And then, of course, we have the Dragonborn Looter. It's a dragon, so it triggers our treasure ability, and then we can draw a card and discard a card whenever we need to. We can filter through if we're drawing clumps of lands, if we have dragons that are just never going to be cast in that game that we're in for various reasons, just throw them away, find better live cards in your deck. Dragonborn Looter is a wonderful card for this deck because it is dragon typed for us. Really quick, before we get into some of the stronger dragons in the deck, there are a couple of pet cards I have in here because I personally love them, and they do synergize with the deck pretty well. We do have Ragefire Hellkite. When it attacks, sacrifice any other creature, so we sacrifice one of our Feywild tokens, and the Ragefire Hellkite will get double strike until end of turn. So 6 mana for a double strike with 5, that's 10 damage to a person. It's not a bad return on investment. And then we have the Shivan Dragon. Pay a red mana to give it 1/0 until end of turn. You may think the era of Shivan Dragon is over, but I want to disagree because we're going to be spawning enough treasures that Shivan Dragon is going to have plenty of things to hit somebody for 20, 30, maybe even 40 damage if we have the board state for it. But then we need to talk about our Hasty Dragons. We want to make sure that our dragons connect to our opponents the turn that they hit the board if we can help it, because we are the aggro player. We don't want to play a dragon and then look at everybody and go, don't worry guys, I'll hit you with these cards eventually. No. We are the dragon player. We want to put people in our maw right now. So we are going to play Archwing Dragon. At the beginning of your end step, you can return it to your hand. It's a 4 mana, 4/4 dragon, so our return is perfectly fine for that. And because it goes back to the hand over and over again, this is a repeatable source of treasure creation for the deck. Chaos Dragon. It's got flying and haste, and you roll a d20 to see who it's not allowed to hit. Otherwise, it's a 3 mana, 4/4 dragon. Hellkite Igniter. This is one of the big boys. This guy is going to turn people into dust. Flying, haste, 2 mana, give it XO, where X is the number of artifacts you control. We are a treasure deck. We are spawning treasures with Ganax. We are, with just 5 treasures on the board, we can sink 4 mana into the Hellkite Igniter and knock somebody's head for 15 damage. If we don't play any dragons on that turn, we're just sinking all of our mana into Hellkite Igniter and clobbering somebody to death with this man. He hits like a lead freight train in here. Then we have the Orscale Guardian. This costs 1 less for every land card in your graveyard. We, of course, have fetching lands to lower his price, but he is another flying hasty dragon. Spirit Dragon. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, so all of our ramp package, any of our adventure dragons, put a 1/1 counter on the Sprite Dragon. Otherwise, it's a 2 mana 1/1 with flying and haste, and that's a perfectly fine return on investment for a deck that wants to hit people with lots of dragons really fast. Shivan Branch Burner. Flying haste. It's got Convoke. We're going to tap all of our little Feywild guys to get him out onto the board quicker. Rarik's Blade Wing, 6 mana for a 6/5 flying haste, well within our area of paying for dragons. We're perfectly fine paying 6 mana per 6 damage. Predator Dragon, another way we're going to close out games. Predator Dragon has Devour 2, which means you sacrifice any number of creatures, and he gains 2/1/1 counters for every creature we sacrifice. So for every single creature we have spawned with the Feywild Visitor, every single dragon token we have made with that, if we no longer need them for part of our draw package, we are just sacrificing them into Predator Dragon, doubling up all of those tokens into straight up raw damage, and we are hitting somebody with a 20/20 in the schnoz with Predator Dragon. I grew up with this card. I love this card. Then we have Stirring Bard. When you enter the battlefield, take the initiative. Yes, that's right. You think I wouldn't make a deck that didn't have the ability to go into the dungeon again? You thought wrong. When it enters the battlefield, take the initiative, which means you get to go into your deck, get a basic land in your hand, and now, as long as you have the ability to keep hitting people, you can go down to the dungeon. The fifth and final room of the dungeon that this forces you into, the Undercity, allows you to get a creature off the top 10 cards of your deck and play it for free. We are the combat deck. We are the ones who will have the initiative 99% of the time, because what's somebody gonna do? Oh, I'm gonna take the initiative from you by hitting you with my Llanowar. Okay, cool. I'm gonna burn you to death and take the initiative from you with all of my dragons. Oopsie doodles. And then we have Territorial Hellkite. At the beginning of combat, choose an opponent at random that it didn't attack during your last combat. It attacks that player specifically. We only care that it's a 4-mana 6/5 flying haste dragon. And then we have Volcanic Dragon, a 6-mana flying haste dragon that is going to make our dreams come true as it sails through the air and hits somebody in the throat. But those aren't the only copies in the deck. Not only do we have a ton of Hasty Dragons in the deck, we also have a very, very important section as well. Dragons by function, but not by type. These are our clones. Back from the brink. Exile any creature card from our graveyard and pay its mana cost. Put a token onto the battlefield that is a copy of that creature. And then we can activate that ability anytime we can cast a sorcery. So we're playing Back from the Brink and then hitting somebody with a dragon. They kill our dragon and we go, okay, that's fine. I pay the mana cost of that dragon to play it again. Most of my dragons have haste, so I'm just gonna crack back. Every single time you kill a dragon, I'm just gonna crack back with it. And oh, by the way, Ganex doesn't say non-token dragon, so this makes a dragon for our commander to see. Crackling Counterpart, put a token onto the battlefield that's a copy of a dragon we control. We can also flash it back for 7. Quasi-duplicate, we can create a token that's a copy of a dragon we control, and then we can cast it from the graveyard as well with its jumpstart cost. Replication Technique. Create a token that's a copy of a permanent we control, any permanent we control at all. But it also says Demonstrate. We can look at an opponent and go, would you like to make a copy of a creature on your board? Wink, wink, mine are bigger. Stolen Identity. Make a token copy of a creature we have, and then it has Cipher anytime our creature swings. If we have put Stolen Identity under it as a ciphered card, then we get to cast Stolen Identity over and over and over again. So here's what you're going to do. You have Stolen Identity. You put it under a creature that you're guaranteed to keep for a while, like Shimmer Dragon. It's got hexproof. You put Stolen Identity under it. You hit somebody in the face and you go, oh, I want to make a copy of my Hellkite Igniter. Again, I would like more Hellkite Igniters. I would like more Chaos Dragons. I would like more Sprite Dragons so that I can get multiple instances of getting 1/1s on things. I want multiple dragons on my board quickly, and I want them now. And the Stolen Identity gets us to that. Normally, you wouldn't run this in a lot of decks because it costs a ton of mana, but we are a big mana deck, so we've got the mana to spend on it. We have the money to spend, we might as well spend it. Then we have Feldon of the Third Path. Pay 3 mana, tap it, create a token of any creature that's in our graveyard, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types, and it gains haste. So if our dragon that we get from the graveyard didn't already have haste, Feldon says, no, it just has haste now. And again, it's another way along with Back from the Brink to make sure that even when our dragons die, because they will be lightning rod targets, we are casting them over and over and over again, and our opponents just have to deal with the fact that our dragons are hitting them a bunch. And then we have Flame Shadow Conjuring. Anytime a non-token creature enters the battlefield under our control, we can pay red. If we do, create a token that's a copy of that creature, and then that token gains haste. So even if we play a dragon that doesn't have haste, the token copy has haste, and this means we can double up on all of our dragons, hit people, which doubles up on all of our treasures, doubles up on all of the fays we are creating, which of course lets us get quadruple treasures every time we do something. We will always have the mana for Flame Shadow Conjuring, because Ganex will always give us the mana for Flame Shadow Conjuring. So never feel like you will not be able to use this card on curve. If Ganex is on the board, this card is always available. This card is always live. And then we have a token generator. Birthing Bows. Pay 4, tap it, create a 2/2 colorless, shapeless creature token with Changeling. Changelings are dragons. So we are going to use this card to basically turn 4 mana that we can't use this turn into a treasure we can use next turn. And the colorless shapeshifter token, it's gravy. We're going to sack it for devour triggers later if we need to. But other than that, this just gives us more ways to get dragons on the board when our backs are up against the wall. Now, we need to talk about the mana in the deck. We have a pretty interesting mana package here. We're going to start out with the Omni lands or the dual lands. Command Tower, add a color of any identity that you've got. Unclaimed Territory, choose a creature type. We can cast it. We can use this for mana of any color for those creature types, so just say dragon. Then Frostboil Snarl and Fiery Islet. It's really weird that I can say Fiery Islet. So Frostboil Snarl, reveal a land in our hand. Otherwise, it comes into play tapped, a basic land. Fiery Islet, it's a pain land that we can sack to draw a card later in the game. I am so confused as to how this card is budget, but I guess the Doctor Who decks have made a budget for us. So that's perfectly fine by me. And then we have the Cerin Frostfire, another land we can throw into the graveyard for some of the synergies I showed you before. The Cerin Frostfire enters the battlefield tapped, but if we pay Is It blue and 2, we can tap it and sacrifice it to scry 2 and then deal 2 damage to every creature. So we get to look at the elf player and say, nah, that's fun. You have like 50 copies of Llanowar Elf. I have 1 land. Tap, boom. This is the second board wipe in the deck, and it's attached to a land. I adore when we can attach board wipes to lands. I adore when we can attach spells to lands in any way, shape, or form. And then we have the Spine Rock Knoll. It is a hideaway land. It will take a land, any card from the top 4 cards of our deck, put it under it, and then we can cast it basically for free. If we deal 7 or more damage to a person in a turn, we are a dragon deck. We are dealing 7 or more damage to people every time we breathe. And then we have the Fetching Lands section of the deck. These are more lands that will make their way into the graveyard. Terramorphic Expanse, Promising Vein, Shire Terrace, Evolving Wilds, Grixis Panorama. All of these can sack themselves to get a land of a color onto the battlefield. Myriad Landscape gets 2 lands of the same type into the battlefield. And then Ash Barrens lets us blow it up out of our hand to get a land if we need a colored land. Otherwise, it goes onto the board as an untapped land. And again, I don't know how many ways I got to stress this. Lower the amount of tapped lands in your deck. Have as many untapped lands as you possibly can, so your deck feels like it is flowing like a well-oiled machine. Otherwise, you will be playing as if you are a turn behind people basically all the time. You can do better for your land base, and you don't have to spend a lot of money to make that happen. We have tons of options in Budget Magic these days. But that said, that was Ganex the Astral Hunter, a wonderful legendary dragon I have been playing for a long time in the 99 of my Miriam deck, and I figured that this would be the perfect opportunity to have him shine as his own commander. I hope you enjoyed the deck. Let me know what thoughts you have in the comment section below. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please do. But also, I am just thrilled that we managed to get dragons for under $15 total, and it's actually a fairly powerful dragon deck. We get all kinds of treasures, we get all kinds of tokens, we have cloning going on, we have all kinds of removal. We get to dominate the board and do it quickly with this deck. So let me know what you think in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you haven't already. We got the deck to $15.13 total, with 23 of those cents, 22 of those cents being our commander, quote. So again, let me know what you think in the comment section below. If you have a deck suggestion you want me to do, then please let me know. But as always, everybody, insert end of video tagline here. Hey, I just quickly want to give a thank you to all of my wonderful patrons who keep this show running. YouTube and Twitch are a pretty bumpy ride at the best of times, and the stability that Patreon provides me is worth more than I can say here. I'd also like to thank each and every one of my $20 and up patrons here, and they would be Red Joker, Blitzkrieg, Cameron, Dren, Jemshin, Smiling DM, Poundini, Mabbity Babbity, Naomi, Isaac, Agamotto, Jordan, Ravi, Giuni, Kiratorian, Prisma, all of you, I'm not saying that part, and Starlight. And finally, thank you to everyone else that helps keep this channel alive. While you're here, why not check out another video? And thank you for watching.